Hello, everybody. Today I came across a KJV only person. I know quite a few of them. And so I just wanted to make this video. My goal is to educate people and to bring people the truth. So, without further ado, here we go. KJV was written in 1610. There are three major translations of the Greek New Testament that come right before it. In 1516, we have Erasmus, who made his translation. He used seven Byzantine Greek manuscripts from Switzerland, seven of them. In 1550, we have Stephanus, who published his translation. And he used 12 Greek manuscripts from the Royal Library of France. And there were a couple good manuscripts that he used in his. From the 5th century, we have Codex Bezae, which is from the 5th century. In 1598, we have Theodore Beza, and he basically copied the work of Stephanus, right? Rode that guy's coattails on his translation. So these three translations basically make up the Textus Receptus, which was used for the KJV. It was used for the New Testament, right? And the Old Testament of the KJV is the Masoretic text. So, which is the Masoretes, the Hebrew scribes, and super accurate, amazingly accurate. But anyway, so why does this matter? Because you hear KJV people, they say, well, they took verses out. They scrubbed some verses from the Bible, right? Man did that. And so, is that true? No, it's not. So, one of the theories of translation is that the older manuscripts are more accurate. Why is that? Well, have you ever played telephone where a message starts over here and it goes from person to person to person, and then at the end, it's not even recognizable and everybody laughs? Well, the original manuscripts, the older they are, the more accurate they are, because the newer ones, more time has gone by and it's thought that there's more opportunity to add to them. So when you have the original Hebrew and Greek, there are words missing that are used in English, like articles, different things like that. And sometimes the subject is added on to the verb. So there's no pronouns can be added on to the end of verbs and different things like that. So it's a different language entirely. So it's thought that people who translate, scribes, sometimes add to it. They add words, and that's a scribal error, and it's pretty common, and it happens frequently. So one of the theories of translation is the older, it's more accurate because it's closer to the time of the actual original. And so since the KJV was written, we have found 5,000 Greek manuscripts, 5,000. And many of them are whole copies, not many of them, but some of them are whole copies of the Greek, New Testament, the whole copies of the Bible with the Apocrypha, such as Codex Alexandrinus, and that dates from 400 AD. So that's a whole copy of the Bible along with the Apocrypha. So we have older versions, and these new manuscripts, right, are based on the Alexandrian manuscripts, and they're older. And so your new translations like the ESV, the NASB, the NIV, all of these translations come from older, more accurate manuscripts, right? So when it comes to the woman today, she mentioned 1 John 5:7, which is a Trinity verse. And in the old manuscripts, it's not there. So it's thought that someone along the way said, hey, the Trinity's not in the Bible. And then some guy took a manuscript to the back room and wrote on it and said, yes, it is. Here it is. Look. They found a manuscript that has that verse literally written in the margin on the side, and then manuscripts after that where it's included in there. So that's how verses get added to the Bible. So rather than say, hey, they took verses out of the KJV, no, the truth is the newer translations use the oldest manuscripts, and they're thought to be more accurate. And those other verses weren't in the original manuscripts, the older ones, and so they weren't included for the sake of accuracy. Now, I'm not dragging the KJV. I think it's a beautiful translation. I think it's really good. But to think that it's the only divinely inspired word of God is just silly. There's 9 mentions of unicorns in the KJV. And so, you know, they say, well, it was an animal that became extinct. Okay, well, you know, there's other translation errors in the KJV. There are other ones. And so it's not perfect. It's a translation, just like many others. But to think that, you know, it's the only one that, you know, has the correct verses in it is just really a misunderstanding of how folks translate Hebrew and Greek, right? And so, you know, it's just a misunderstanding, right? Rather than say, hey, these verses are missing, we can say, hey, well, maybe these verses were added later, and maybe the original version of it is more accurate. And so I think, why does this matter? It doesn't really, but sometimes when we go around and we tell new believers that the King James Version is the only inspired word of God, it's just a fallacy. It's just not true. And so we just need to be really careful with that, you know, because it's not KJV only. Okay. So